We are going high altitude and deep into one of the most incredible unsolved mysteries in aviation history. This is the case of D.B. Cooper.
It really is. It remains the only unsolved act of air piracy in American history. A crime so audacious, I mean, it's so precisely executed, that it just captured the public imagination.
Yeah.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, is that every piece of physical evidence Cooper left behind, you know, from the dust on his tie to the way the money was found, it all seems designed to point the investigation in two completely contradictory directions.
Exactly. It's baffling. So before we unpack the facts, we really have to set the scene. You have to imagine the climax happening, well, almost before the beginning of the hunt. It is November 24th, 1971, 8:13 p.m. We are inside the cockpit of Northwest Orient Flight 305.
Okay.
It's dark, raining heavily, and it's tense. The whole world is just this low green glow from the instrument panel and streaks of rain hitting the windscreen.
Yeah, and the plane is a Boeing 727. It's flying at this almost agonizingly slow speed, battling these severe headwinds over really unforgiving, rugged terrain. We're talking the Cascade foothills.
And the pilots are just following these highly unusual, very technical flight parameters dictated by the men in the back. And then the moment they'd absolutely been dreading, around 8:13 p.m., the crew feels it.
What was it?
A sudden, slight upward shudder in the tail section. It's the feeling of something heavy, you know, moving away from the aircraft.
Okay.
Simultaneously, the warning light on the control panel, the one that tells them the aft air stair is open and lowered, it just winks out.
Gone. And at that same precise instant, you feel the pressure shift in the cabin, just enough to make your ears pop violently.
Oh, wow.
Captain William Scott knows. The man known as Dan Cooper, soon to be, well, immortalized as D.B. Cooper, has stepped out the rear of a commercial jet, 10,000 feet up.
Into a pitch-black freezing gale. Just vanished.
Yeah, disappeared into that 170-mile-per-hour wind, carrying a 21-pound bag stuffed with $200,000 in ransom.
Incredible. So this deep dive, it's built on synthesizing detailed chronologies, official FBI files, the NORJAK investigation files, and some truly groundbreaking forensic science reports, especially concerning the tie and the recovered money.
Right. Our mission really is to understand not just the crime itself, but the internal conflict within the evidence.
Yeah.
How could it point in such different ways?
Exactly. We're asking, how could a crime so meticulously planned contain such a, well, catastrophic error? And how did the discovery of evidence only manage to deepen the central mystery instead of solving it?
It's a great question. Think about that as we move through this story, because honestly, every step we take just seems to introduce a new paradox.
Okay, so let's start where it all began. We call this part one, the gentleman hijacker.
Right. And to truly grasp the audacity of Cooper, you really have to mentally transport yourself back to 1971, a radically different era of air travel.
Absolutely. Today, flying is, you know, a massive stressful hassle, long lines, comprehensive screening. But back then, it was still very much an event.
Oh, yeah. People dressed up. Men wore suits and ties. Women wore nice outfits. And critically, security was practically non-existent.
Right. No metal detectors, no mandatory photo ID, certainly no baggage scans. Trust was just the baseline.
And Cooper was the perfect person to exploit that atmosphere of trust and, well, formality. He just walks up to the Northwest Orient counter in Portland, pays cash for a single $20 one-way ticket. It's just a 30-minute commuter puddle jumper flight from Portland to Seattle. Identifies himself as Dan Cooper.
And the witness descriptions, they paint this picture of the ultimate gray man, like designed to blend in. Mid-40s, 6 feet tall, dark hair, wearing a meticulously neat black business suit, a crisp white shirt, and that defining, almost comical detail, a black clip-on tie, held by a mother-of-pearl tie pin.
A clip-on, yeah. He boards the Boeing 727, settles into seat 18C, orders a bourbon and soda, lights a Raleigh brand cigarette. Calm, polite, entirely unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the professional crowd.
And that absolute composure, that was his greatest weapon. The plane is barely airborne when he passes a folded note to the 23-year-old flight attendant, Florence Schaffner.
Okay, so this is the moment.
This is it. Schaffner later recounted that she initially assumed it was, you know, a pickup line. Given the context of the era, she just pocketed it.
Makes sense. She was trained to be courteous and professional, right? And that training immediately played right into his hands.
It did, but Cooper wasn't interested in flirting. He leaned in, his voice low and firm, overriding her initial assumption with just chilling clarity.
What did she say?
Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb.
Wow. Straight to it. The note itself has since been lost. Cooper actually retrieved it, but Schaffner clearly remembers the content, specific demands, and the statement that he was armed.
The psychological shift must have been immediate. Terrifying. Schaffner sat down next to him, and then he gave her the terrifying confirmation.
Yeah, he opened his cheap black attaché case just wide enough for her to see. She saw a mass of red and black wires, a large cylindrical battery, and 8 red sticks tied together that looked exactly like standard dynamite.
They didn't rant. He didn't threaten loudly.
No. He simply showed her the threat and snapped the case shut again. Very controlled.
This is the key to the psychological analysis, isn't it? Cooper deliberately avoided making a scene or creating mass terror. He established what we might call a private bubble of terror with the crew, particularly Schaffner and the other flight attendant, 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
Exactly. He leveraged their professional training, their instinct to maintain order, follow protocol, de-escalate to guarantee quiet compliance. He didn't need panic. He needed efficiency.
He wasn't aiming for widespread terror. He was focused entirely on logistics and control.
Right. The goal immediately shifted from managing a dangerous threat to fulfilling a highly specific list of requirements.
Which brings us neatly into part 2, the precise demands and the fatal flaw. This list of demands, transcribed by Schaffner and taken to Captain William Scott, shows, well, remarkable specificity.
It really does. The list had 2 major components. First, the money. $200,000 in negotiable American currency, to be composed entirely of unmarked $20 bills.
And that specific phrase, negotiable American currency, I mean, it sounds really formal, almost bureaucratic, you know? It suggests a background maybe familiar with formal or legal language, or perhaps even military protocol.
Could be. And the physical scale of that money is important to grasp, too. $200,000 in 20s. That meant the FBI had to gather 10,000 individual bills.
Wow.
That bundle, even tightly wrapped, weighed a massive 21 pounds. That's a hefty load to carry, especially when you're planning on, jumping out of an airplane.
Definitely not easy. So the second component was the equipment.
Yes, 4 parachutes. He demanded 2 primary backpack chutes and 2 reserve chest back chutes. And here's where it gets interesting. When the FBI, already scrambling, offered him military-grade parachutes,
he rejected them.
Explicitly rejected them. He demanded civilian parachutes with manually operated ripcords. This suggested, really strongly suggested, profound, hands-on knowledge of skydiving gear and its specific mechanisms.
Okay, now let's analyze the demand for 4 chutes. Why 4? The FBI immediately assumed, and it seems brilliantly, that he planned to take a hostage. Maybe one of the flight attendants forced them to jump with him.
And that assumption, whether he intended it or not, was pure psychological genius on his part. By making the FBI believe he might take a hostage, Cooper effectively immunized the parachutes against tampering.
Ah, right. Federal agents couldn't risk sabotaging the equipment if they thought an innocent person's life was on the line.
Exactly. He basically guaranteed himself a supply of functional chutes without having to inspect them under pressure.
Oh, or so they thought. The logistical scramble at SeaTac around 5:39 p.m. must have been immense. The FBI raced to assemble the ransom, photographing every single bill, recording the serial numbers.
The plane sat on the tarmac, window shades lowered to block any potential snipers. The 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants were released.
Completely unaware of the hijacking drama.
Right, blissfully unaware. Hold only that there was some kind of mechanical issue causing a delay.
But despite Cooper's meticulous attention to detail, this moment, the moment of the hurried supply drop, introduced the critical, potentially fatal flaw into his entire plan.
And this is just shocking when you think about it. The parachutes were sourced from a local Seattle skydiving school in the rush to meet the deadline.
What happened?
One of the 2 reserve chest pack chutes provided was a non-functional, sewn-shut dummy training chute. It was only meant for classroom demonstration, not for actual use.
No way. So this guy who knew enough to reject military chutes and demand specific civilian ripcords?
Yeah, that's the contradiction. He failed to visually inspect or physically recognize the dud chute, something that apparently would have been pretty easy to spot.
So maybe he was just over-reliant on his psychological insurance policy, believing the FBI wouldn't dare tamper.
Could be. Or maybe just a lapse of concentration at the absolute most critical moment. Who knows?
The plane is refueled. The exchange is complete. Cooper now dictates the final, terrifying phase of the operation. The plane takes off at 7:46 p.m., heading south toward Reno, Nevada.
And it's the flight parameters he mandates that definitively point toward him being some kind of aviation insider. He tells the pilots to fly at the absolute minimum airspeed, around 115 miles per hour.
That's incredibly slow for a jet.
Right. He demands low altitude, below 10,000 feet, which is necessary to keep the cabin unpressurized. So he wouldn't need an oxygen mask for the jump.
But the truly bizarre instruction, the one that really stands out, landing gear down.
Landing gear down and wing flaps lowered to precisely 15 degrees.
To a layperson, that just sounds insane for a powerful jet. Why fly a plane with maximum drag burning fuel like crazy?
But to an aviator, it makes perfect terrifying sense. Those components, the gear and the flaps, they create massive resistance. It allows the heavy 727 to maintain stability at extremely low speeds.
Ah, okay. So it's the ideal setup for someone who needs a stable platform for an exit.
Precisely. It also confirms he understood the plane's unique physical characteristics. He was exploiting the Boeing 727's unique ventral air stair design.
For listeners who haven't seen one, the ventral air stair is basically a set of stairs that lowers from the belly of the fuselage near the tail.
It provides a clean, unobstructed exit, completely away from the engine exhaust and the wings. Most modern commercial planes use stairs near the front or side doors, but the 727 had this critical feature he absolutely knew how to exploit.
This was clearly a man who didn't just understand airplanes in general. He understood the flight limitations and structural advantages of the Boeing 727 model specifically.
Almost certainly an aviation insider of some kind. So the flight takes off. Cooper sends the remaining flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, back into the cockpit with the rest of the crew. Instructs her to stay put.
She is the last person known to have seen him alive. Alone in that dark, unpressurized, rattling cabin, Cooper makes his final preparations.
And that takes us right into part 3. The leap in the hunt, 8:13 p.m.
Cooper secures that 21-pound bag of $20 bills, the ransom-using lengths of cord he actually cut from one of the discarded parachutes. Resourceful.
He straps on 2 chutes, the primary backpack, and, tragically for him perhaps, the sewn-shut dummy reserve.
And he's wearing nothing more suitable than a business suit, a clip-on tie, and loafers. Then he lowers the aft stairs.
Just imagine the conditions he stepped into. The wind noise inside that stairwell must have been absolutely deafening. 170-mile-per-hour gale force just slamming into him.
Yeah.
The temperature outside was well below freezing, especially factoring in wind chill. Below him, a pitch-black void, possibly obscured by clouds, hiding the jagged, unforgiving forests and peaks of the Cascade foothills.
It is the ultimate high-risk scenario. And this single moment, this leap, is where the great mystery truly splits, leading us into the debate that has fueled this case for 50 years. Survival or death.
The argument for death was the FBI's initial official position. And look, it's strong. They argued that no experienced jumper would attempt this leap.
Why not?
Well, the environment alone, pitch black, freezing rain, unknown landing terrain, totally inadequate clothing, it was practically a death sentence. If hypothermia didn't get him in minutes, the likelihood of a fatal impact on the tree canopy or a rock face was immense, especially since he was using an older, harder-to-steer T7 parachute canopy design.
Okay, that makes sense. But the survival argument counters this by suggesting he wasn't just experienced, but possibly trained, like a military veteran with deep survival skills.
Right. While a jump in those conditions is horrific, statistically, the fatality rate for experienced skydivers is actually incredibly low.
And we have historical evidence supporting survival too, don't we? Think about the thousands of airmen who bailed out of crippled bombers during World War II.
Exactly. They often jumped at night into unknown, sometimes hostile territory, sometimes with damaged chutes or no reserve chutes at all. And the documented survival rate in many of those scenarios was surprisingly high, near 80%.
Plus, in the months and years immediately following Cooper's jump, several copycat hijackers tried the exact same stunt, jumping out of the rear of a 727.
And some of those guys survived their jumps. It proved the concept was viable, maybe especially for someone with military survival training. The jump was lethal, yes, but not inherently impossible.
So once Flight 305 landed safely in Reno minus one passenger and $200,000, the exhaustive manhunt began, codenamed NORJAK for Northwest hijacking.
Yeah. And the initial clues found on the empty plane were incredibly meager. That clip-on tie and its tie clip, the 2 parachutes, the good primary and the useless dummy reserve, and 8 filter-tipped Raleigh cigarette butts. That was basically it.
And here we have to pause for a piece of essential history.
Right.
The immediate media failure that gave him his famous name.
Ah, yes. The FBI knew him as Dan Cooper, but a reporter in Portland, rushing the story to print, misreported the alias, confused it slightly, and instead wrote D.B. Cooper.
And the name just stuck instantly. The Phantom now had a catchy, fictional, and permanent moniker.
The physical search that followed was a true logistical nightmare. The potential drop zone in southwestern Washington was vast, rugged, heavily forested, crisscrossed by rivers and streams.
And because of the heavy winds and the inexact timing of the jump, the variability in the search area was enormous, hundreds of square miles.
Hundreds of agents, soldiers, patrol boats combed the area for weeks. They used maps, complex wind trajectory models, but they found absolutely nothing.
Nothing. No body, no parachute canopy, no money bag.
Zero. He had seemingly executed the perfect escape into the wilderness.
So for nearly a decade, the case went completely cold. It just slipped from law enforcement files into American folklore. But the FBI held on to those meager clues, including that cheap black JCPenney clip-on tie.
And that tie became the key that, decades later, would tell a story far more compelling and, frankly, more confusing than any human witness.
And that leads us right into part 4, the clues that contradict. This is where modern forensic science and the discovery of the money introduced 2 new conflicting narratives about who Cooper truly was.
Okay, the first major breakthrough came much later, around the turn of the century. It really demonstrates the case's longevity. In the early 2000s, technology finally allowed the FBI to develop a partial DNA profile from skin cells found on the tie.
Did it match anyone?
Nope. Never matched any known suspect in their databases. But the real game changer came when a group of citizen scientists, specifically led by a paleontologist named Tom Kay, got permission to analyze the tie using far more advanced tools than the FBI had available back in '71.
Citizen scientists. That's interesting. What were they looking for?
Kay's team wasn't looking for biological residue. They were looking for dust, microscopic particles. They used a high-powered electron microscope to analyze the fabric. And what they found was basically a forensic map. Over 100,000 microscopic particles embedded deep in the tie's fibers, tracing potentially everywhere this tie had been.
What kind of particles?
Well, most of the dust was common stuff, fibers, dirt, pollen. But hidden among all that common residue was the bombshell, particles of pure, unalloyed titanium, along with rare earth elements like cerium and strontium sulfide.
Titanium. In 1971, that sounds specific.
Extremely specific. Back then, pure titanium wasn't a common metal you'd find in everyday items. It was a high-tech, strategic metal, used almost exclusively in cutting-edge aerospace projects, maybe deep-sea exploration or certain specialized chemical production.
And the rare earth elements, cerium and strontium sulfide.
Yeah, those are specific byproducts or catalysts used in complex chemical processes, often related to manufacturing high-grade metals or specialized materials. This combination dramatically narrowed the suspect pool. It pointed the investigation away from, say, the woodsman or the generic skydiver.
So the tie screamed, white-collar industry insider.
Exactly. It suggested Cooper was maybe an engineer, a technician, or perhaps a manager working in a highly specialized field, like perhaps Boeing's recently scrapped supersonic transport project, the SST.
Or maybe at a specialized chemical plant that supplied the aerospace industry, like Crucible Steel.
Precisely. The tie he left behind painted this picture of a calculated professional, someone deeply involved in high-tech industry.
Okay, so the tie tells us he was an aerospace or specialized chemical industry insider. But 9 years later, the money tells an entirely different, almost impossible story that seems to contradict the immediate death theory.
Right. In 1980, almost a full decade after the jump, an 8-year-old boy, Brian Ingram, was on a family picnic at a place called Tanimbar.
Tanimbar, where's that?
It's a sandy spot on the banks of the Columbia River, miles away from the initial drop zone estimates, and actually north of Portland. While digging a hole for a campfire, he uncovered 3 rotting, waterlogged bundles of $20 bills.
No way. Was the ransom money?
It was $5,800 worth. And critically, the serial numbers matched the ransom list. It was the first, and still the only, portion of the money ever recovered.
That should have been the breakthrough.
You'd think so, but instead it became the case's most baffling paradox.
How so?
Well, first, the location. Tinar is far downstream from the assumed drop zone. Very far. Second, the condition. The bills were found in 3 neat stacks, still secured by rubber bands.
Neat stacks. After potentially falling 10,000 feet or being swept down the river.
Exactly. If they had plunged into a forest or been tumbled downstream in the initial November rains, they should have been scattered, shredded, a total mess. Finding them in neat stacks suggests they were perhaps placed there. Or buried.
Okay, that's weird. But what about the science?
And this is where it gets even more confusing. The diatom analysis. Scientists analyzed the microscopic algae embedded in the paper money. Diatoms are tiny organisms and they grow seasonally.
Right.
The specific species of algae found suggested the bills had entered the river system in the spring, months after the November jump.
In the spring, not November. That finding is profound. It means the money was likely not lost immediately upon landing.
Could mean that Cooper, if he survived, maybe hid the money somewhere, and then perhaps spring floods or erosion allowed a small portion of it to wash out years later.
Or it was planted, dropped into the river by an accomplice much later.
Both are possibilities raised by that diatom evidence. It just deepens the mystery. And then there's the perhaps less scientific theory about the location name itself, Tina Bar.
Tina Bar. Wait, like Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant.
Some citizen sleuths pointed that out. Could it be a cryptic nod to her, the flight attendant who spent those final terrifying hours with Cooper? Maybe a psychological message, or maybe just pure coincidence?
Given the complexity of everything else, it's hard to dismiss anything entirely, right?
Pretty much. So that conflicting evidence, the calculated insider suggested by the tie versus the rugged survivor perhaps implied by the money paradox, that brings us squarely into part 5, the two faces of Cooper.
The FBI considered, over 800 suspects over the years, but the evidence keeps steering us toward two fundamentally different archetypes.
Yeah, you have this conflict. The tactical planning and apparent survival skills point towards a military veteran type, but the forensic trace evidence on the tie points towards an aerospace professional.
So let's start with Profile A, Richard McCoy Jr., the daredevil. His resume is almost too perfect, isn't it?
It really is. Decorated Vietnam veteran, Green Beret, demolition expert, and, crucially, an avid and highly skilled skydiver.
And just 5 months after Cooper's jump, McCoy pulled off a nearly identical hijacking. Boeing 727, ransom demand, parachute escape out the back. The similarities were uncanny.
Yeah, led many to believe they finally had their man. The FBI did eventually rule them out, though. They cited physical descriptions that didn't quite match perfectly, and a shaky alibi that placed him at home in Utah for Thanksgiving dinner when Cooper was buying his ticket.
McCoy was caught for his hijacking, right? Served time, but then orchestrated this famous prison escape using a fake gun made from, toothpaste foil.
That's the one. He was killed in a subsequent shootout with FBI agents in 1974. For decades, he remained the most compelling death suspect, the guy who clearly had the skills, even if the official timeline didn't perfectly align.
But the McCoy theory has gotten serious momentum recently, hasn't it?
It really has. In 2022 and 2023, an investigator and pilot named Dan Grider was contacted by McCoy's children. They claimed their father was Cooper and had successfully covered his tracks.
What evidence did they have?
They uncovered an old parachute with specific suspicious modifications. Modifications that apparently matched the type of rig supplied to Cooper that night.
Wow. So the FBI took this seriously.
Seriously enough that they actually reopened the evidence chain in 2023.
Yeah.
They took the parachute and McCoy's logbook into evidence. It shows how seriously they view the possibility that McCoy could have been both the original D.B. Cooper and the successful copycat. He fits that battle-hardened paratrooper profile perfectly.
Okay. But then we have to pivot completely to Profile B, Vince Petersen, the aerospace insider. This is the man brought to us by that microscopic evidence on the tie.
Right. Petersen was a research engineer at Crucible Steel in Pittsburgh, a major supplier to aerospace giants like Boeing.
So Petersen's background places him directly in the world suggested by that titanium clue.
Exactly. His laboratory was reportedly one of the few facilities in the country at that time actively working with the precise combination of pure titanium and those rare earth elements found embedded in Cooper's tie.
Did he fit otherwise?
Well, he frequently traveled for work to the Seattle area, placing him geographically where the crime was planned and executed. He also fit the general physical description provided by the flight crew. Neatly dressed, professional-looking, composed.
Petersen passed away in 2002, I believe.
It did. He represents that calculated, white-collar professional profile, a man with the technical knowledge to demand precise flight parameters and maybe understand the 727's unique design features.
So if we step back and try to synthesize this, the mystery endures because the specific facts perfectly support two, mutually exclusive types of criminals.
Yeah. Was Cooper the hard-edged Green Beret like McCoy, with the grit and training to survive that insane jump? Or was he the brilliant, perhaps disgruntled engineer like Petersen, who understood metallurgy and flight dynamics.
And this raises that fascinating question again. How could a man with the technical expertise suggested by the tie, someone who knew what he was doing, demanded specific civilian chutes make the catastrophic blunder of strapping on a dummy reserve chute?
It's a huge contradiction. Perhaps he was a combination of both. Maybe an engineer with military experience who just suffered from task saturation in the pressure cooker of the final escape moments.
Or maybe the tie was just a secondhand item he happened to wear that day. And the titanium dust was a red herring, a coincidence that diverted the investigation away from a simpler truth.
It's the ultimate riddle. Every time a new piece of evidence surfaces, it doesn't seem to eliminate suspects. It just validates contradictory ones.
Okay, moving now to our final thoughts. Part 6, the lasting legacy.
Right. After 45 years of intensive investigation, the FBI officially suspended its active investigation in July 2016. They basically stated they would only reopen the case if they found new, tangible evidence that could be tested forensically.
So D.B. Cooper was never caught, and no evidence of his death was ever definitively verified?
Never. And the vast majority of that ransom, $194,200, remains completely unaccounted for. It has never shown up spent in circulation, and its serial numbers are still monitored.
So it's either sitting preserved somewhere in the Pacific Northwest wilderness, maybe buried,
or it was destroyed by the elements long ago, lost forever.
In his absence, Cooper transformed, didn't he, from a high-stakes criminal into this legendary American folk hero?
He really did. He achieved this strange sort of immortality because he pulled off the perfect daring crime without, crucially, ever hurting anyone. He became the symbol of the ultimate anti-establishment ghost, noted for his peculiar politeness and that almost surgical calmness under pressure.
But the hijacking left a deeply tangible and permanent legacy, one that fundamentally changed aviation security worldwide and specifically targeted the very mechanism Cooper exploited.
That's right. In the wake of the Cooper hijacking and the copycats that followed it, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, mandated a permanent safety change. Every Boeing 727 and subsequently any aircraft with a similar rear ventral air stair had to be retrofitted with a special mechanical device.
And this device has a name, right?
It does. This spring-loaded paddle is known throughout the entire aviation world as the Cooper vane.
Named after him. That's incredible. How does it work?
It's actually a simple, elegant piece of mechanical engineering designed to solve a complex criminal problem. The mechanism works purely by air pressure. When the plane is in flight, the force of the air hitting this vane physically blocks the rear stairs from being lowered.
So it makes that aft exit impossible until the aircraft is safely on the ground, stationary and depressurized.
Exactly. Think about that. He left behind a safety mechanism literally named after him, ensuring that his specific style of crime can never be repeated. He may have disappeared entirely, but he is literally built into the aircraft design of the past half-century.
It's truly astonishing when you consider how much we do know about the periphery of this case. We know the exact flight path, we have the serial numbers of the ransom money, we know the microscopic composition of the materials on his cheap clip-on tie, and we know the exact physical device created specifically to stop him.
We know all of that, yet the most fundamental binary question remains completely unanswered. Did he live or did he die?
And if he somehow survived that brutal 10,000-foot jump, how did a man wearing a business suit and, let's not forget, a useless reserve chute manage to evade the largest manhunt in U.S. history? And where did the $194,200 go?
He didn't just escape the plane. He escaped the historical record itself, leaving us only with this conflicting mess of clues that suggest he was simultaneously a meticulous insider and a deadly survivalist. We know everything about the crime, except for the criminal.
The perfect enigma. We hope you'll continue to mull over the riddle of the tie and the money. That was our deep dive into the perfect, unsolved mystery of D.B. Cooper.